Hey guys, so we are now in the 8th part of the second Crusade series by Kings and Generals, and if you want to watch the original video by Kings and Generals, the link to this video is down in the description down below. It is the first link you will find, and if you want to help support me in any way, shape, or form, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and consider being a YouTube or Patreon member. It would really help me out a lot. Now with that said, and now without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Let us watch The Second Crusade by Kings and Generals, Part 8.
After the siege of Edessa came to an end, the victorious Zengi spared its Armenian and Jewish population, but put its Latin Christians to death. With the lands up to the Euphrates secured, Zengi made preparations for his next campaign onto Damascus in 1145, which ultimately failed. This refocused Zengi's priorities on consolidating his gains in northern Iraq and Syria. Fate, however, would not be so kind to the Islamic hero. In 1146, while besieging a rebel fortress of Kalashjibar, Zengi held a lavish party, during which he became heavily drunk. After the feast was over, the warlord saw that one of his eunuchs of Frankish origin, named Urankash, drank from his cup. Angered by the eunuch's audacity, he ordered Urankash to be executed by dawn, after which he fell asleep in his tent. In an act of desperation, Urankash moved to Zengi's quarters and stabbed the Seljuk warlord to death. After Zengi's death, the Zengish domain
Oh my gosh, dude. That's not how I expected him to go. Why is everyone dying in such anticlimactic ways? John the second Komnenos hunting. Fulk falls off his horse. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how I expect these guys to die, but just kind of like so, like there's so much build up. Like, oh my gosh, and then they just die. Who's writing this plot? Like, you make these characters too powerful. You don't have a way to write them off screen, so you just you know. But dang, I literally his stock was rising. I thought he was gonna be like the nemesis for the rest of the series. I thought Zengi was going to be the new adversary for everyone for like the rest of this series, but the dude literally just died like that. Dang. Okay, so on the other hand, though, this is probably the best thing that could happen to the Crusaders, unless someone else immediately follows Zengi who proves to be just as good or better, then they're screwed. But at this moment, this would probably be a good time to try to maybe get Edessa back.
were divided among two of his sons, Nur ad-Din, who governed Aleppo, and Saif ad-Din Ghazi, who took power in Mosul. Seeing Zengi's death as an opportunity, Count Choslin attempted to retake Edessa, but this attempt was repulsed by the two Zengid sons, who, contrary to Crusader expectations, united against the Latins, rather than fight amongst themselves.
That's literally what I thought was about to happen. I thought they were about to have a civil war. Who gets the dynasty? Dang, that sucks. Never mind, that's not happening.
Meanwhile, the situation in the Kingdom of Jerusalem was looking dire. Queen Melisande intended to use Jerusalem's alliance with Damascus, currently ruled by Anur, to make a joint counterstrike on the Zengids' domains. The only factor that the Queen Mother didn't consider was her co-ruling son, Baldwin III, who was willing to undermine his mother's authority.
Oh my gosh.
Baldwin successfully convinced most of Jerusalem's army to aid Damascus's rebellious governor of the Hauran region, Al-Tuntash, in exchange for the strategic fortress of Bosra. This venture proved to be a disaster, as Anur avoided battle with the Latins until the attackers began suffering from starvation and were forced to retreat.
Oh no.
Without Baldwin.
Okay, that's a bad start. Okay, so Baldwin kind of instead helped support. So Unur and Melisande established an alliance, and it seems like Baldwin now has undermined that alliance because he wanted to help this rebel within the Damascus ranks, which ended up backfiring. Okay, that's not a good start, Baldwin. Like I said, Baldwin the First, great king. Baldwin the Second, great king. Baldwin the Fourth, the leper, great king. I was like, that's 3 Baldwins in a row. Well, not in a row, but 3 Baldwins that were great. And I was like, okay, what about Baldwin the Third? Is he gonna live up to the other Baldwins and be good as well? I mean, we still have, I know he dies really young though, but as of right now, he seems like the weak link of the Baldwin line. That's not a good start. That's not a promising start.
When support, Al-Tuntash's rebellion ended quickly. Baldwin's doomed venture cost Jerusalem dearly, for after being betrayed by his Latin allies, Onur reluctantly decided to ally himself with Nur ad-Din.
Oh my gosh.
Overall, the loss of Edessa and the Crusader states' inability to respond properly to the Zengid threat made it necessary to call for another crusade.
Of course, because they're all divided. They don't have like competent leadership. Again, like they are easy pickings now. So yeah, a crusade is needed. Are we finally gonna get to the actual Second Crusade now? Because I swear we haven't gotten to the official one. We were like over halfway there, and I feel like we haven't gone into the big point of the Second Crusade. You get me?
On the 1st of December 1145, Pope Eugenius III announced a papal bull known as Quantum Praedecessoris. This document encouraged the European knights to aid Jerusalem and the enslaved Christians to the east by promising absolution from sins to any participant. Interestingly, unlike Urban II's call for the First Crusade around 50 years earlier, the document itself did not set a clear goal for the crusade, which would later cause problems for the involved crusaders.
Oh no.
Eugenius's bull was initially met with little enthusiasm. Eugenius's authority as pope was undermined by the Commune rebellion in Rome, led by Arnold of Brescia, which had driven him into exile in Viterbo. Moreover, the pope had another powerful enemy in King Roger II of Sicily, who openly challenged his legitimacy. However, when the papal bull reached King Louis VII of France, he gladly answered the papal call. When the 25-year-old king announced his intention to go on crusade, the French court was divided on this matter. Only a few nobles, led by the Bishop of Langres, agreed to the idea. The majority, represented by Abbot Suger, opposed the king's intentions. They were concerned that the king's long absence from France could potentially open the monarchy to internal and external threats.
True.
Undeterred, Louis still had one ace up his sleeve, and decided to consult with one of the most prominent orators and intellectuals of his times, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux was a known figure in the Catholic world. After his appointment as an abbot of a Cistercian monastery, Bernard distinguished himself by reforming his monastic order and saving the church from the disastrous papal election of 1130. Consequently, Saint Bernard managed to establish connections with the European elite, turning him into a pope maker. Saint Bernard was also a staunch supporter of the crusading movement. Invited by the French king to Vézelay on Easter of 1146, the Cistercian abbot delivered a fiery speech by rhetorically enriching the papal Quantum Praedecessoris. The French royal court, together with crowds of commoners present, rose up in enthusiasm, crying for crosses. Things almost went south as many spectators rejoiced at Saint Bernard's performance, jumping on the wooden platform on which the Cistercian made his speech, which resulted in the platform's collapse. Luckily, no one was hurt or injured, which was only received as a miracle and a good omen for the coming expedition.
Oh no. They take it as an omen. I take it as this is going to be a disaster. Oh boy. Yeah, I've missed the unhingedness of the Crusades, because every crusade is unhinged in its own special way, I feel. So, I feel like great enthusiasm, but you guys need to chill out for a few seconds.
The word quickly spread around the rest of France, and with further Bernard preaching, more tales of cures and miracles arose around the saint. It didn't take long before these stories began to circulate throughout all of Western Europe, and it didn't take long before Saint Bernard's call for crusade had reached the ears of the German king Conrad III. At first, Conrad wasn't interested in the crusade. Instead, in the hopes of receiving the imperial crown, he planned to cross the Alps to help restore the Pope's power in Rome.
Learning without school.
His concerns also related to internal disputes in the Holy Roman Empire. Despite being elected as King of the Germans, the opposing members of the Welf dynasty still plotted against Conrad. So, to nobody's surprise, Saint Bernard's first audience with the German king was coldly received. Nevertheless, the abbot of Clairvaux didn't give up, and on the second meeting in Speyer, he tried his luck again. During the public sermon, Saint Bernard used his speech to famously envision Conrad on the Day of Judgment, and, acting as a Christ, asked the king directly, "Oh man, what is there that I should have done for you and did not do?"
Dang, dude, literally religiously guilt-tripping him. Some fire and hellstone, at least have a similar idea, but dang. Bernard kind of gives me Peter the Hermit vibes from the First Crusade. Someone incredibly charismatic who everyone is listening to. So, Bernard seems like the new Peter. I'm going to call him the second Peter in that regard, you know? That they have that kind of similarity. This dude is like upgraded all his he invested all his points in charisma. He only rolls nat 20s when it comes to speeches, and yeah, this man definitely used that power.
Ashamed by his ingratitude in defense of Christ, Conrad cried out loud and with tears in his eyes replied, "I am ready to serve him."
He literally guilt-tripped him, holy crap.
Thus, the King of Germany too decided to go on crusade. Almost simultaneously, other calls were received from Iberia, as King Alfonso I of Portugal.
Okay, check out our YouTube member and Patreon exclusive series on the Iberian Reconquista by supporting us via... Okay, yeah, let's see. War, Spanish. Yeah, there's a lot of Patreon exclusives with Kings and Generals and YouTube members series.
King Alfonso VII of Castile and Count of Barcelona, Ramon Berengar IV, became interested in spreading a crusading movement to fight against the Moors in Al-Andalus, a tale we will describe shortly. Thus, due to the will of a single man, what was supposed to be a private venture of a French monarch became a fiery movement that sprung the entirety of Catholic Europe into...
Dang, dude, Bernard really only rolls nat 20s, bro. Like, his speech, like I said, he invested all his points in charisma, the charisma stat. My goodness. He is suffering from success right now.
Action. At first glance, Pope Eugenius was very pleased with Bernard's successful promotion of the crusade. On the other hand, Eugenius feared Conrad's involvement in the crusade would allow his Sicilian enemy, Roger II, to operate against the papacy back in Italy freely. At first, the Sicilian king wanted to participate in the crusade, and due to possessing an enormous navy, was capable of transporting crusaders by sea to the Holy Land. The problem was that Roger simultaneously waged war not only with the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire, but also with the Byzantines. This meant that adding Roger to the crusade could, from the Byzantine-Greek perspective, put the Crusaders' motives into question. Moreover, Roger had claims to the Principality of Antioch through his de Hauteville bloodline. Thus, Roger's involvement was discarded.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
he's too much of a wild
preparations
card.
in France and the Holy Roman Empire began to take place. The French contingent, led by Louis VII and his wife Eleanor, had many nobles who accompanied the royal couple. Additionally, the Count of Savoy, Amadeus III, also agreed to follow the king, but promised to catch up later in Constantinople.
Is that Eleanor of Aquitaine? Is that the same Eleanor? Because I remember when we covered the Eleanor of Aquitaine series by Extra History, yeah, I do remember she actually went on crusade with Louis, and then they basically had a lover's quarrel, which ended up in them separating because they fought a lot, and then she went off and, you know, married, what was it, like, what, the King of England or something, and then, you know, as we know, she was the mother of, like, John and Richard the Lionheart, and helped to really solidify a great empire from Aquitaine to England. So yeah, overall that comes back to me. I forgot that it was the Second Crusade this all happens, but actually it does make sense considering Richard is, you know, was mainly involved in the Third Crusade. So all right, if that is, it's all coming back to me now.
Meanwhile, the German contingent consisted of Swabians, led by Conrad's nephew and successor Frederick, Bavarians and Austrians, followed by the Duke of Bavaria and Margrave of Austria, Henry II Jasomirgott, and forces of Lorraine and Franconia, commanded by Stephen, Bishop of Metz, and Henri, Bishop of Toul. A huge part of the army also included allied Slavic contingents from the eastern borders of the empire, such as the Bohemian Duke Vladislaus II and one unnamed Polish duke. Modern scholars estimate that each crusading army could number up to 20,000 men,
Oh, wow.
not including their servants, a very impressive army size for the era. The initial plan was for both armies to meet near Constantinople, from where they would jointly move through Anatolia and reach the Outremer. The Pope had already sent emissaries to the Byzantine Emperor Manuel Komnenos, informing him about the coming help to the east. Although glad of the Latins' willingness to help Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Basileus didn't really need their assistance as much as his predecessor Alexius Komnenos did. With that said, the Seljuks of Rum and Danishmenids were still a threat to Byzantine holdings in Anatolia, so any military prospects might be helpful. By the end of May 1147, King Conrad's Crusader host went out from Nuremberg and continued its march to the east, leaving the French Crusader army behind. It took more than a month of further preparations and talks with the Pope before King Louis VII departed from the Abbey of Saint-Denis on the 8th of July 1147, trying to catch up with the German king.
Alright, Crusade time!
Meanwhile, in the north, in the Holy Roman Empire, not every noble was eager to go to the Holy Land. Some of them, like the 17-year-old Duke of Saxony Henry the Lion, alongside Albrecht the Bear, Lord of the Northern March, rather preferred to take up arms against the Slavic tribes in the western Baltic, also known as the Wends, who were still present in modern-day Holstein, Mecklenburg, and parts of western Pomerania. The Wendish Slavs were divided into 5 tribes: the Abatrites and Wagrians to the west, Stodorans to the south, and Leotizians with Rani to the east. These tribes, though some of them tributaries to the empire, like the Stodorans, many of them still defied Christianity and continuously blocked Catholic missions through the Elbe River.
Oh boy.
This was due to the pressures of expansion led by the empire's frontier nobility. Another reason was the growing influx of Saxon and Frisian settlers who were trying to establish themselves on the borders of the empire, especially in the territories of eastern Holstein and Wagria. Eager for more conquests, the northern German elite had asked Bernard of Clairvaux and Pope Eugenius III to declare a new crusade on the Baltic Sea.
Oh my gosh.
After pleading for a while, they had finally received 2 papal bulls on the 11th of April 1147, also known as Divina Dispensione. This document allowed the German Crusaders to receive the same spiritual recognition for the Saxons as the Crusaders marching towards the Levant. Moreover, Bernard emphasized the need for the spiritual character of this conflict. Thus, he forbade the Crusaders any treaties with the enemy, stating that, until such time as, with God's help, they shall be either converted or wiped out.
Oh, that's dangerous. Oh, that mindset could lead to genocide. Oh, that's a dangerous mindset. Oh gosh. Alrighty, things are starting to fracture. Like, you know what I mean? Every crusade, things start to fracture. Everyone loses the plot. It does not help that they don't have an official goal either. Like, okay, go to the Holy Land, then what? Like, what are we gonna do? I guess help the Crusader states, but I think Crusaders are already dangerous when they have a goal. They are more dangerous when they don't have an official concrete plan. Because at that point, they just do whatever they want, so... This is dangerous, I feel. Very, very dangerous.
Previously, it was assumed that by this document, Saint Bernard did literally intend to exterminate the Slavs.
Oh my gosh.
However, modern scholars like Ibn Fonnesberg-Schmidt tend to question the interpretation of Bernard's policy of convert or die, as he points out that the Latin term that was used, donec auxiliente Dio aut ritus ipse aut natio diliatur, could not only mean the extermination of the Slavs, but instead it could also mean the destruction of the Wendish political and religious structures as a whole. Nevertheless, it was very possible that the meaning of Bernard's call was overturned for the Saxons' convenience, as many of the crusading leaders sought to subdue the Baltic Slavs for their own gains. More polarizing rhetoric also managed to draw the attention of individuals from not just northern Germany, but also northern Europe. Hearing the papal calls for a crusade, the 2 pretenders to the Danish throne, Svein III and Knut V, decided to postpone their showdown in an attempt to punish the Slavs for their raids on Jutland and Zealand.
Dang, these poor Slavs, they were just like here, and then like everyone used the opportunity for Crusade to jump them. Like, these guys are just chilling, and then everyone's like, can we just all declare war on them, please? Possibly commit genocide, because Bernard's warnings are easily to warp to our advantage, so like, these poor guys, the Wends, they're about to get jumped by everyone.
In reality, the actual situation on the Elbe frontier had been much less polarizing than the Saxon elite presented it. The Wendish Slavs had a long history of conflicts, as well as alliances with the Christian rulers of the Holy Roman Empire, the Kingdom of Denmark, and the Polish princes. Although all these saw the Wends as a potential target for their territorial expansion, some of the Wendish princes still retained good relations with some of the border Christian nobility, like in the case of Niklot, Prince of the Oberdreiz, who was allied with Count of Holstein Adolf II, as well as Pribislav Henry, who had an amicable relationship with Albrecht, ruler of the Eastern March. However, with the Crusade in motion, the local lords had to cut their ties with the Slavs. The most energetic of them all was Prince Niklot, one of the earliest nobles to realize the crusading tensions on the Elbe. At first, Niklot asked his ally, Count of Holstein, to aid him against Henry, but because of vassal oaths to Henry and papal pressure, Adolf refused. In response, the Slavic prince assembled his bands of warriors, also known as Druzina, fortified his keep at Dobin, and most importantly, allied himself with the Rani. Living on the island of Rügen, the Rani tribe were known as devoted pagans, worshipping the god Svantevit in Arkona, and possessing perhaps the most prominent war fleets on the Baltic Sea, that managed to inflict many raids on the Kingdom of Denmark and the Holy Roman Empire.
I'm Noelle. I go to...
Confident in his Rani allies' military prowess, Niklot could be aided by sea, as well as being prepared for a possible Danish attack from the north. Then Niklot decided that the best defense is offense, attacking the Saxon and Flemish colonies in Wagria. In a surprise attack, he managed to sack the city of Lübeck, and thus threaten the Germanic presence in the region. Returning with loot, supplies, and additional Slavic contingents, Niklot decided to wait in the reinforced keep of Dobin, and prepare for the inevitable showdown with the Crusaders. To muster the crusading army, the Pope designated Archbishop Anselm of Havelberg as spiritual leader of the crusade. The Crusaders themselves were divided into two major armies. The first was led by Duke Henry, with the strongest Saxon contingent. It also consisted of other smaller German groups, led by Conrad, Margrave of Meissen, Archbishop Albert of Bremen, Duke Conrad of Burgundy, and Bishop Tietmar of Verden. Its main purpose was to cross the lower Elbe at Magdeburg to move and capture the fortress at Dobin. The Saxons, who arrived from the south, were meant to join with the Danish army led by Canute V and Svein III. The Danes were supposed to blockade the army from the north. The second group was led by Archbishop Anselm of Havelberg, together with Margrave Albrecht, followed by other nobles. The plan, designed by Albrecht, suggested moving through Stodorani territory and capturing the Leutissi city of Demmin. The progress of the land armies was hampered by narrow passages and dense forests, with endless marshes along the way. This greatly delayed the Saxon advance, as Niklot had delegated some of his warriors to launch guerrilla warfare throughout his territory. Despite facing casualties and a threat to their supply lines, the Saxon host had eventually reached Dobin. The Danish princes also fulfilled their promise to the Crusaders, disembarking their ships at the Vanov River and approaching the keep with their forces moving up the river. At first, things looked grim for Niklot, as the town had been surrounded from both sides. Still, the capture of Dobin wasn't an easy task. The keep was located on a hill in the middle of a ford between two lakes, Lake Schwerner to the west and Lake Dörper to the east. Another advantage was the lack of proper communication between the Danes and the Saxons, as both parties preferred to take the city on their own, rather than jointly collaborate as a unified Crusader army. After initial assaults from German and Danish forces, it became clear that a prolonged siege would be inevitable. This only gave precious time for Niklot, as Slavic guerrilla warfare had already begun to take its toll on the Crusaders, stretching Saxon supply lines thin.
Oh my.
It was at this point that the Rani allies could finally arrive at the Vanov River's delta. There, the Rani ships found the Danish fleet put on land, with little to no vessels guarding the shore. Sensing the opportunity, the Slavs launched a surprise attack, spreading terror amongst unprepared Crusaders. At first, the Danes tried to immediately drag the ships onto the river and chain them together, but the plan was ill-organized, allowing more maneuverable Slavic vessels to break through the gaps, only intensifying the Danish losses. Seeing the destruction of the ships on the delta, Danish Bishop Eskil gathered warriors besieging Dublin with haste and jumped onto the remaining ships, trying to flank already preoccupied Rani ships. The Slavs, however, spotted this and decided to retreat immediately. After this attempt, the Slavs tried their luck once again, but to no avail, being chased by the Danish fleet. At some point, when the Danes were already on their next pursuit during the afternoon, they were stopped by the terrifying view of hundreds of ships, alight with torches, approaching them. This proved to be a ploy designed by the Rani, who managed to gather merchant and fishing boats disguised as warships, in order for the Danes to think that the Slavic fleet was more numerous than it really was.
Wow.
Shocked at the turn of events, the Danes...
Dude, these Ronnie guys just showed up out of nowhere and just making havoc, wreaking havoc on the Crusaders. My goodness. Smart. Big IQ move from the Ronnie. Big IQ.
decided to move on to land and focus on besieging Dublin instead. As Bishop Eskil could be relieved not seeing the Rani ships for a while, something was rotten in the state of Denmark. Danish princes still distrusted one another, and after the first defeat at the Varnov Delta, as well as constant failed attempts to take the city, the princes began blaming each other. It didn't take long before animosities began to rack up in the Danish camp, with the Jutland and Zealand contingents at odds with one another. Seeing the Danish camp demoralized, Niklot embarked on a night attack, killing many Danes and destroying much of the Danish supplies and siege engines. Suffering heavy losses...
Dang, dude, Niklot, on paper, I thought he was going, like, get wrecked, but this dude is, like, wrecking the Crusaders. You know, this is why a lot of the Crusades failed, because no one's really unified. They all have rivalries, they all have egos, they can't really unite. That's the problem with Europe and things. No one's really gonna fully unite. And when you're facing an enemy that's for the most part on the same page, that goes to show the importance of unity. An enemy that's divided will always be easier to take out. So yeah, good on Niklot. This is the weirdest side adventure ever. Like, it's like Second Crusade begins, and let's focus what's happening right here. Like, you know, this is such a weird side adventure. I mean, it is a part of the Crusades, just you know what I mean. Feels like a side quest before we get back to the Holy Land, you know?
Svein III and Knut V decided to lift the siege and move towards their domains, preparing for their eventual showdown.
Oh my goodness.
On the other side of the ford, the siege conditions also deteriorated for the Germans. Seeing no breakthrough, the crusading host began to divide on the issue of Dubin's fate. The wealthy lords and margraves, including Duke Henry, deemed Slavs as future slaves for the Saxon settlers and intended to starve out the defenders to force their surrender. Pilgrims and poorer crusaders quickly found this decision to be contradictory to the official Crusades rhetoric, or at least what they believed. They thought they could loot the town and slay all its inhabitants, thus fulfilling their crusading vow.
Oh my gosh. I like they haven't even like gotten into the city yet, but they're like, okay, we must now decide. I'm telling you, this is why so many crusades failed. The first one was a miracle. Despite all the issues, they managed to pull off a great victory, but you know what I mean? So many of the subsequent crusades were failures, and it just goes to show this is the big problem. They're not really an army, they're a mob. You know what I mean? Of a bunch of different groups who already don't like each other, who are never fully on the same page due to European politics and everyone not really, like, again, all the rivalries that exist. Like, it goes to show, man. Wow.
It didn't take long before quarrels began to stir in the German camp, and with supplies running low, the pressure began to mount on Henry. At first, he tried to divert the Crusaders' attention by trying to raid and loot the neighbouring villages. However, the defenders of Dublin didn't budge, leading to gradual Crusader desertion. Trying to walk out of Dublin with any semblance of victory, Duke Henry demanded that the Oberdrites be baptized, to which Prince Niklot agreed. It was only later revealed that the Slavs' baptism was less of a submission, but rather a farce instigated by Niklot, where baptized Obradrites were mocking the Christian rituals during the entire ceremony. Angered but powerless, Henry called for withdrawal beyond the Elbe. On the eastern frontier, the Albrecht contingent crossed the Elbe as planned.
Dude, Niklot owned Henry so hard. Dang.
Seizing the town of Hobelin, renaming it as Havelberg. After marching to and looting the town of Melchov, the Germans besieged the town of Demmin. Unlike Margrave Albrecht had planned, the Liutizi were probably warned by the Oberdrite prince and prepared for a siege. Though the German forces had necessary siege equipment, Albrecht shared a similar vision for Demmin as Henry, planning to enslave the locals for his own purpose. Like in the case of Dobbin, some of the pilgrims began protesting Albrecht's actions, questioning the Margrave's religious motives, and began leaving the crusade. Albrecht had to quickly find a new solution to convince the Crusaders to continue the campaign. Left with the remaining part of his original force, Albrecht decided to change his target and encouraged the Crusaders to attack the city of Szczecin, claiming that it was a vital Slavic paganism center, just like the island of Rügen, only more weakly defended. Convinced by Albrecht's rhetoric, the Germanic pilgrims moved east, heading toward the city on the Oder River. The remaining forces, led by Abbot Wibold, stayed at Demmin, trying to maintain the town's blockade.
Southern California Edison has a...
When the main contingent reached Szczecin in the middle of September 1147, they yet again began to build camp and readied the siege equipment. According to Helmund of Bossau's Chronicle of the Slavs, just as the Crusaders were about to assault the city, the gates of Szczecin were opened, and much to their surprise, instead of Wendish counterattack, only one man appeared before the Saxons, and it was none other than the city's local bishop, named Adalbert, who greeted the Crusaders, asking them about their plans. To add insult to injury, the Szczecin citizens demonstrated crosses on the city walls. Adalbert claimed the city was Christian and was under the protection of the Polish Pomeranian Duke Ratibor I. Shocked to his core, the papal representatives backed down from Albrecht's crusade, and many—
Oh my gosh, what a disaster. What a crap show. This is what I was missing. Like, the Crusades being the most unhinged, failures. Oh my gosh. Dang, Albrecht and Henry just taking L after L. It's humiliating.
The pilgrims followed suit, accusing the Margrave of manipulation and political opportunism, as the German Margrave was known to have conflicts with the Pomeranian Duke. By the end of September, the Germans decided to leave the crusade, angered at Albrecht's false guidance. Meanwhile, the remaining Germans besieging Demmin shared a similar fate and abandoned the crusade as well, according to Wibold's claim, due to unknown internal divisions. The only thing that managed to save Albrecht's reputation was securing the town of Havelberg, when the Starodani prince, Pribislav, was baptized and named Henry. When the Slavic Knyaz died in 1150, in his will, he gave Albrecht the right to inherit the territory of Stadorania. Albrecht claimed the land under a new name, later known as Brandenburg. Pribyslav's main keep, Kopanica, became part of the city called Berlin.
Oh wow.
The Wendish Crusade, at first glance, seemed to—
Yeah, but at least Albrecht got the better of the two. Like, he got something out of it, so that's good.
accomplished little for the Second Crusade, but its long-term impact on Northern Europe was immeasurable. For the first time in history, the papacy began to take an interest in the Baltic region, thus opening a new chapter in the crusading movement, also known as the Baltic Crusades. The Wendish Crusade wouldn't be the last time Duke Henry and Albrecht would try to pacify the Wendish Slavs, as Niklot's death in 1160 during the siege of Bergwelle only encouraged further Saxon expansion into Slavic territory. The events of the Wendish Crusade did not dissuade King Conrad III from his journey. After marching from Nuremberg to Ratisbon, Conrad's army entered the Kingdom of Hungary in June. Though Hungary was Catholic, its king, Geisa II, was unfriendly to the German king. Just a year earlier, Geisa had fought with the Bavarians and Austrians, and thus did not trust the Germans. Furthermore, Geisa had other reasons for being afraid of foreign armies in his territory. A pretender from the Arpad dynasty named Boris had claims to the Hungarian throne, and possessed many connections in the Holy Roman Empire. Despite the tensions, King Geisa II allowed Conrad's hosts to pass through his territory, though probably not without papal guarantees. While marching through Hungary, King Conrad was met with the Byzantine embassy led by Demetrius Macrembolites and an Italian named Alexander of Gravin. Emperor Manuel was well aware of Conrad's plans and demanded an oath of non-injury on imperial territory. Conrad agreed, and thus the Byzantine embassy led the Crusaders to cross the empire's border at Branicevo. The Germans passed through Niš and Sofia without any major setbacks, as Emperor Manuel ordered the local governor, Michael Brannis, to prepare markets for German arrival. The problem started as the Crusader host reached the outskirts of Philippopolis. There, during one day of rest, a group of German pilgrims misinterpreted the jokes of a local juggler, interpreting his tricks as sorcery and killing him on the spot.
Oh my
The
gosh.
angered
No one can just like do something normally, like just like a normal march. There's always a problem that happens. My goodness, guys. Come on.
townsfolk rallied for their favorite trickster and started to launch guerrilla warfare against the Germans.
Oh my gosh. That juggler, man, he was popular. You know?
An immediate distrust between the Latins and the Greeks soon followed, compelling both sides towards further retaliation. Emperor Manuel had originally intended to host the Crusaders in Constantinople, but upon hearing reports of the Germans' violence, he instead sought to reroute Conrad's troops through the Hellespont. Dissatisfied with such a proposal, Conrad declined the offer and continued the march on Constantinople.
Oh my gosh.
So Manuel sent an army to follow the Germans. Tensions reached their boiling point when both armies reached Adrianople, where a group of locals snuck up and murdered one of the German knights. In response, a group of Swabian knights, led by Frederick, burned down a nearby monastery. Upon hearing of this, the Byzantine army readied for battle, only to be talked down by their commander, Prusch, at the last possible moment. In the end, it was not the Byzantines who punished the Germans, but the local weather. While the German army encamped on the Cherubachi plain, intense rains caused the Melis River to flood most of Conrad's encampment. Believing this to be a punishment from God, the Crusaders then marched all the way to Constantinople without any trouble. The Crusaders received their
Okay. Alright. There's always a problem when these crusaders march into Roman territory. It never just goes as smoothly. It reminds me of the First Crusade so much.
quarters near Philippatium Palace before the city walls. While this was happening, Emperor Manuel invited King Conrad to his palace and began talks with the German king. Although the Crusaders' actions had been troubling for both rulers, they both managed to maintain amicable relations due to their mutual hatred towards Roger II of Sicily, who was not only an enemy of the German king, but just so happened to have declared war on Byzantium too. The German and Byzantine rulers also had family ties, as Manuel's wife, Bertha von Sulzbach, was Conrad's sister-in-law.
Oh wow.
The Empress herself played a key role in peaceful talks between both rulers, as new reports began to mount over Crusaders pillaging in the countryside near the city. Though the Roman Emperor managed to strengthen relations with Conrad, he didn't intend for both crusading armies to meet. So Komnenos politely insisted that the German king cross his army to Anatolia as soon as possible. By throwing lavish gifts at the Crusaders and promising to help the Germans whenever they needed, Conrad agreed to Manuel's proposal, thus altering the Crusade's initial plans. Rather than wait for the arrival of the French, the Germans would now march into the Holy Land on the road.
Yeah, that's smart. And that's smart on Manuel, because he doesn't want these two armies all together, like, around his city. You know, in case bad things happen. So, kind of like what Alexios did, just ferry them, get them out of your territory as quick as possible. Yeah, good on Manuel for that one. That's smart. You don't want them all together where they can be a rambunctious bunch, you know, right in your capital.
As promised, the Byzantine navy helped the German Crusaders sail through the Bosphorus to Chalcedon. In the midst of preparations, part of a French vanguard, made up of French-speaking Lorrainers, reached Constantinople and found the German departure shocking, as it jeopardized the initial plan of a joint Crusader army. The French Lorrainers also counted on German Crusaders to share their rations with them. Whether due to language differences or pure greed, the Germans not only refused, but also abandoned the French Lorrainers as soon as they landed in Asia Minor, much to the horror and protest of the German Lorrainers. Left on their own by the Germans in Constantinople, the Lorraine group would later antagonize the French Crusaders against Conrad's men.
Wow.
As soon as the German host landed in Chalcedon, King Conrad moved to Nicaea, where he had to decide between two potential routes through Anatolia. The first coastal route was longer and prone to raids from Rum Seljuks, but it also had more Byzantine strongpoints, whose garrisons could support the Crusaders. The second mainland route ran through hostile Seljuk territory, but it was much shorter than the previous one. Emperor Manuel tried to help Conrad by sending him a Varangian guide named Stefan, who advised Conrad to move along the Aegean coastline. At first, Conrad followed Stefan's advice, but just a day later he changed his mind and decided to move inland. Still trying to remain cautious, Conrad divided his force in two, leaving one Otto von Freising to march along the coast to Italia through Laodikia with a few men-at-arms and pilgrims, while the main part of the army would march inland through hostile territory. Conrad's motivations behind this decision are hotly debated, but the German king likely intended to quickly capture the Sultanate of Rum's capital at Iconium, where he could resupply his army.
This is dangerous. I feel like already, I'm not sure about dividing yourself. Like, you're kind of by yourself. And as we saw, it reminds me in the first Crusade series, when some Crusaders kept trying to go into Anatolia to get to the Holy Land, but the Seljuks would just jump them and destroy their armies. Like, I know that we're kind of a few generations past the first Crusade, but assuming that the Seljuks are as formidable now as they were then, or even more, this is very dangerous for Conrad to go through the main route. I feel like definitely the coastal path is the safer one, especially since he's alone on this one, but oh well, I guess we'll see.
Conrad's march through Anatolia went smoothly for as long as the Crusaders marched through Byzantine territory, but the situation quickly changed when the Germans entered Seljuk territory. The Sultan of Rum, Mesut I, did not intend to just let the Crusaders pass freely. Another enemy to the Crusaders was the climate, as most of the German knights and footmen were not used to Anatolian heat. The starved and thirsty Crusaders began to split from the main army near the town of Dorylaeum in order to find provisions. That was exactly what Sultan Mesut was waiting for.
He's about to get jumped.
From the 25th of October 1147, the divided Crusader contingents began to encounter Turkish horsemen raining down arrows on the unprepared Germans. King Conrad initially intended to repel small Muslim attacks, but as these detachments began to encounter heavier and heavier resistance, he realized his force had just entered into a trap. Soon, shouts were heard from all sides as Mesut gathered his troops and charged into the German main force. At first, the German nobles intended to fight, but seeing his men exhausted and dehydrated, Conrad decided to call for an orderly retreat. Not every contingent followed the order and had to withstand Seljuk hit-and-run tactics on their own. During the withdrawal,
with courses,
the Seljuk cavalry constantly harassed the Germans with an unending mix of arrow barrages and melee charges, all the way until the Bosphorus coastline, inflicting heavy losses on the Germans, with reportedly only 1/10 of the army managing to escape from the battlefield.
What a disaster. Okay, the Seljuks definitely still have it. That was dangerous, and yeah, Conrad made a really dumb decision there.
Even Conrad himself was wounded in the neck during the retreat. Beaten down and humiliated, Conrad retreated to Nicaea to resupply and wait for King Louis's French Crusader contingent to arrive. As the German Crusaders suffered a humiliating defeat in the east, another Crusader army...
Oh, dang. Alright, I went a little overtime, so I'm gonna stop the video right here. And yeah, we're finally in the main crusade, so I guess we'll see more tomorrow. Bye, everyone.